So President Cyril Ramaphosa has approved the appointment of Mandisa Maya as South Africa's next Chief Justice. She will start in her new role on the 1st of September. Let's get more reaction on the appointment. And joining us now but later on we'll be joined by Advocate Glynnis Breytenbach, Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development, who's also a member of the DA, will be joining us a bit later on. But right now, we're going to start off the conversation with the Acting Director for Women's Legal Centre, Charlene May. Charlene, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So when it was finally set that this is it, Mandisa Maya does become the next Chief Justice of the country, what went through your mind?
Morning, Elgin. Thank you so much for having us. I think it's an important moment in not just the legal profession, but for the country. I think for many women within the legal profession, they would say, well, finally. And it's not, I think, a case of a woman having broken through a glass ceiling, but almost a woman having been forced to break through what was a concrete ceiling. And so we're welcome as the Women's Legal Centre, and I think as women within the legal profession, we welcome that finally a woman sits at the head of the highest court in our country. It is a well-deserved appointment.
And how do we approach the conversation, Charlene, that yes, that on one end, Mandisa Maya indeed is a woman, but she is also an exceptional jurist who has been celebrated and has received all of these accolades, even becoming the first president of the Supreme Court of Appeal, that her appointment shouldn't necessarily be seen as an appointment of a woman, but an appointment of the best person for the job.
Yes, and I think what's important about your question and about the statement is that as women, we know that we can be multiple things at the same time. And yes, as I said, she definitely is, it's well-deserved. She is qualified. She sits in that position because she is the most qualified person to hold that seat. And she is a woman. And I think that that's something that she tried to make very clear when she was interviewed for the position was, I'm not coming before you. I think as most women, we applying for or seeking appointment to positions of leadership, we don't come to the table saying, please appoint me because I am a woman. We come to the table saying that we believe that we are the most qualified person to take up this leadership position. And she certainly is. And so I think what's important here in the moment, I think that's a learning opportunity for all of us, is that recognition that within women's identities, that we are multiple things. We can be mothers, we are sisters, we're daughters, we can be legal professionals, but we can also be the most qualified person to sit in the seat and be the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. And so it's a brilliant moment as we go into Women's Month to be able to make that, send out that message to young women within the legal profession, but within our country.
Yeah, I just quickly want to take you to something that was mentioned back in 2020 by the then former, well now still former Deputy Chief Justice of the country, Dikgang Moseneke, speaking on his book, All Rise, a judicial memoir. And this was on a webinar that was hosted by the Nelson Mandela University. And he was specifically speaking about women in the judiciary. And this is what he says, that without transition before 1994, you had to be white, male, senior counsel, and liked by the Minister of Justice to become a senior judge. It was a self-serving arrangement to produce the same people to become the guardians of the law. Not even white women cracked it. I'd like your reflections on that.
Look, I think that the profession, and certainly as a woman within the legal profession and working with other women in the profession, we know that patriarchy, that is the legacy on which our legal profession is based. Patriarchy still remains ever present within the profession. We know that the majority of students, for instance, that enter our law schools to study law are women. It's young women, it's Black young women in particular that enter studying in universities. But as soon as we look post articles, for instance, articles of community service or entry level into the legal profession, that's when we start seeing women disappear from the profession. And a lot more work needs to be done in order for us to address that legacy that Judge Moseneke talks about. And it's not something, unfortunately, that's in the past. Last year, we commemorated 100 years of women in the legal profession. And that didn't come easily. And we still have a lot more work to do in order for women to be visible, to be seen, and to be recognized in all aspects and facets of this profession.
Let's now bring into the conversation Advocate Glynnis Breytenbach, who is a member of the Democratic Alliance and also sits on the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development. Glynnis, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us as well this morning. Your reflection on Mandisa Maya's appointment and what it means for women who are in the legal fraternity. At some point, for instance, Glynnis, you were a prosecutor arguing before judges, and now the head of the judiciary is actually going to be a woman.
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, I've listened carefully to your interview with Charlene, and largely I agree with her. Look, it's a wonderful moment, mostly for Justice Maya. It's a crowning achievement for a stellar judicial career, for a stellar legal career. So, you know, our very warmest congratulations to her. And it is very, very nice, very, very inspiring to see a woman at the pinnacle of the judiciary. And she has, as you said, she has had a number of firsts in her career. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that, you know, she's a woman of substance, a lawyer of substance, and a judge of substance. So she will, I've got absolutely no doubt, continue, because she has done in the past, but continue to contribute to our the jurisprudence of South Africa. It's a wonderful thing.
What do you think then, Glynnis, Mandisa Maya's priority should be as she takes over as the head of the judiciary in South Africa?
Oh, you know, there's so much work for her to do. I don't know what a priority would be. Our justice system is so beset with problems. There's so many that need to be tackled simultaneously that it's an almost impossible task. As the head of the judiciary, she's not only in charge of all the judges of South Africa, but she also, you know, has a huge responsibility as regards the magistracy. We all know of the serious problems in all of our courts with regards to backlogs that needs to be tackled. The court dates at the moment, I think in Gauteng are moving to 2025. It's a shocking state of affairs that has got to be addressed. We're having difficulty attracting people to apply for positions in the judiciary. Hopefully that will also change. And a part of that problem is, of course, that, you know, judges, contrary to popular belief, work exceptionally hard. It's a stressful job of long hours every single day, and they've got very, very little support. And, you know, Justice Maya certainly knows that. Judges have little to no administrative support, little to no research support. The resources with regards to IT is seriously constrained. You'll find many judges sitting up late at night typing their own judgments. It's an exceptionally demanding job, not only intellectually but now also, you know, physically. And there's a massive amount of pressure on judges, you know, to not make mistakes. They're humans like the rest of us, but their mistakes are paraded on a very public stage if they make them. So, you know, we have to improve the position of judges and magistrates. in regards to their resources and their support systems in order to be able to attract quality people to those positions.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. The infrastructure, court infrastructure, not only in the high courts, but more particularly in the lower courts, is shocking. The conditions in which judges and magistrates and prosecutors and advocates, and more particularly the public, because they have no choice, are forced to conduct their business is quite appalling. So, those are things that will need to be addressed. Justice Maya, as the president of the Supreme Court of Appeal, the last time we went to the court as a committee on oversight, we found that the only lift in the building could not be utilized because the two bottom levels were flooded with water. So any, for instance, disabled or older person who could not access the courts because there's only one court on the ground floor. So they couldn't access the upper floor courts because there was no way to get there.
So there's a lot of work that lies ahead for Justice Mandisa Maya. And Charlene, if you look at, for instance, today we have the annual report, the annual judicial report that will be handed down by Justice Zondo. Lots of issues that have been raised, including, for instance, the capacity and also the decision around the expansion of the jurisdiction of the Constitutional Court. Mandisa Maya has spoken about this as well during an interview with the JSC. And what do you think should happen now to ensure that the judiciary is capacitated?
Yeah, I think that some of the important problems and issues, I think, has been highlighted by Glynnis in her contribution now. I think key for us is issues of safety within courts. For our organization in particular, we've been looking at the issue of sexual harassment in the courts, for instance, and whether it's sexual harassment by colleagues, whether it's sexual harassment that's being experienced by legal practitioners or staff members within courts. I think it's a serious issue. I think the fact that 100 years after women have joined the profession, 30 years into our democracy, the fact that there isn't a sexual harassment policy that covers and governs judges is a serious oversight on the part of the judiciary. And so when we look at important things or areas of key priority, as Judge Maya comes to the fore, we know that she's been working on that sexual harassment policy, and we welcome the very, as quickly as possible, the introduction of that policy
Charlene, actually,
into the court system.
Charlene, on that particular point, because she raises that in her interview as well with the JSC, that, listen, I have done the work and I've handed over the report to Justice Zondo, and I wonder then who should be held accountable? Why don't we have a policy in place when Mandisa Maya is saying that I think it's been close to a year now that report was handed over to the head of the judiciary?
Yes, exactly that. And I think that you raised the important question around accountability, right? And we can't have at the highest court there being perceptions around lack of accountability. And so I think that with the experience that she brings, with her resilience that she has shown over the years in getting to this point, I think that it's something that she will definitely be able to drive through. I know that it's something that she's committed to doing. She spoke about it during her interviews. But at the same time, we have to ask the question around accountability, because I think the lack of policy structure does speak to those issues around accountability. And judges need to be held accountable. There need to be structures in place that are capacitated, and that are able to do that for us as ordinary South African citizens. Because at the end of the day, it's the Constitution that guides all of us, right? That must uphold all of our rights. And the people that sit on the bench, that are the guardians of that Constitution, cannot act outside of that framework. And so it is important.
Speaking about the accountability of the accountability that judges, the oversight that is required over judges as well, and the accountability there of Glynnis Breytenbach. You are a member of the JSC, and she, of course, will become the chairperson of the JSC. You will be sitting alongside Dr. Hlophe. You have now written to have Dr. Hlophe interdicted. This is now from the Democratic Alliance's side. Are you confident that that's a possibility at all, that during the next round of interviews in October, that Dr. Hlophe won't be sitting next to you interviewing judges or potential judges?
Yeah, certainly the Democratic Alliance has approached the courts for relief in this regard. So I have a number of other NGOs. It's such an enormous contradiction to have the first judge in democratic South Africa to be impeached, to sit on the very body that impeached him, found him guilty of misconduct so gross that he was later impeached by Parliament. It's just, it beggars the imagination how that's possible. Of course, there's a loophole there that needs to be corrected, and we're working on that, but it's not going to be retrospective, of course. But in our view and in our submission, the fact that Dr. Hlophe is now notionally a member of the Judicial Services Commission is such an irrational, unreasonable situation that I do believe the courts will intervene, and it will. I see nothing but problems going forward if he remains. It has.
What sort of problems? What sort of problems? Quickly, Glynnis.
Well, it has the potential to render the JSC completely dysfunctional. The first interviewee will come to the commission and they will object to the presence of Dr. Hlophe on their interviewing panel because of his background and his history and his history within the judiciary. He'll refuse to recuse himself as in the past, and that will lead to litigation, and nothing will happen. The JSC will become incapable of functioning. The other judges will also not be able to be appointed. The entire process will be rendered lame. And it will just have a knock-on effect for the entire judiciary that is completely and utterly unimaginable. So, with respect, if Dr. Hlophe had any kind of self-respect and a sense of responsibility, he wouldn't have made himself available and avoided this huge problem that we now face. So, it's unconscionable to think that he should sit on the JSC, and I'm hoping that the court processes will, be quick and will be finalized before the sitting of the JSC in October.